All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, anyone who's joining us. And if you're joining us after the fact, we're so glad you're here. So, are you an introvert living in an extroverted world? My guest today, Carol Stewart, is known as the coach for High Achieving Introverted Women. I love this. Today, we're going to talk about how to exude presence and excel as leaders while being your authentic self. I tell you, Carol, that really caught me. I love that. Carol is an executive and career coach. She's the founder of Abounding Solutions and the author of a fabulous book. This is how I found her, which is there. Now you can see it. Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman. So good morning, Carol. So glad to have you here. How are you?
Hi, Margo. Thank you for having me. I'm very well, thanks.
Oh, good.
I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Well, I'm telling you, this has been a very newsy week, I think, for us. Obviously, we're in the US and you are in the UK. So between Brexit and the new strain of coronavirus, and here we have an insurrection, it's been quite a newsy week. So
what is going on?
What's going on in the world? But here we are, and we're going to try to carry on and try to help people be their best selves amidst the craziness. So I very much appreciate you being here. So first of all, we talk about introverts and extroverts, and can you just tell us how you see introverts and extroverts? What is an introvert? What is an extrovert for your definition?
Right. So for me, how I see it, it's about how we are energized. And introverts, they're typically concerned with things which are internal to our minds, whereas extroverts are typically concerned with things which are external. So introverts will find certain events or places where there's lots of people, lots of activity. It can be overstimulating, whereas extroverts will thrive in those sorts of environments because they get their energy from being around people and that external stimulation, whereas introverts like to go. It's not that we don't like being in those sorts of environments, it's just that they can be draining, and we like to have sort of quiet time to go inwards, and that's where we draw our energy.
So it's in part how we refuel. Where do we feel energized? How do we feel energized? Right. So it's different than being shy necessarily. Someone can be an introvert and not be shy.
That's right. And there are a lot of misconceptions around introversion, and many people think that somebody who is introverted is shy, but someone who's extroverted could be shy as well.
Someone who's extroverted can be shy. Absolutely. And what about, are you familiar with ambiverts?
Yes, I am. Yes. And they tend to, so we all have a preference. If you sort of think of it along a continuum, extroversion at one side, introversion at the other side, and we all have a preference as to where we fit along there. And some people have a preference towards the center, and they're known as ambiverts. And different situations, different environments will determine what our preference is. So it could be that someone who has a preference mainly towards introversion, in certain environments, they may appear more extroverted. And it could often I find that people who are like myself, who are introverted, when we're in smaller groups, we can be appear more extroverted when we're in smaller groups than when we're in a larger group.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. So I think that, there's been lots of conversation during the pandemic about what this is like for introverts, what this is like for extroverts. And I have surprisingly found, I would have thought of myself as someone who would have really struggled during a time like this. I love going to networking meetings. Who likes that stuff? I love going to networking meetings. I love meeting new people. I love chatting with them. And I have been the happiest little clam ensconced in my house. I've noticed my nervous system has relaxed. I sleep better. So there's a way that we can rise to it and maybe enjoy elements of it. But boy, it's interesting noticing how I think I would probably classify myself more as an introvert than I would have thought.
Uh-huh,
Even if I'm really comfortable with other people at times, but I'm so much more relaxed, I think, in this environment. So
yes, and I'm finding a lot of introverted people are enjoying that working from home because they enjoy that space, whereas people who are extroverted, like friends who are extroverted, it has really affected them, that being indoors all the time, not being around people, it has affected them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and we've heard about just in general how women have been, and of course you can be introverted and be a man or be a woman. We've heard how much women have been impacted by this current state because of the pandemic, and how much they've been impacted in the workplace. And so it kind of makes me think about, I've been thinking lately about women and women leadership. And, we tend to think of leaders as being really outgoing, dynamic and outgoing, basically extroverted. So, but, so how does all of this impact people who are naturally introverted, but really want to be successful as leaders? I think there are a lot of women who are going to be coming back into the workforce at some point, who are hoping to either pick up where they were before, to move into even higher. They might have been on a track where they were heading toward a leadership position, despite their natural inclination for introversion or extroversion. And now they've been sort of derailed. So how do they get back into the game, especially if they're more introverted?
Yes, I mean, it can be challenging for some. Everything is virtual now, and it's about having a presence, being visible and having a presence, but still not putting on a persona, because some people think that they have to put on this extroverted persona if they want to get ahead. But then the problem with doing that is it's stressful and they can come across as inauthentic. So it's about finding ways to adapt to the environment while still being yourself, and looking at how you can raise your visibility, how you can still network in a virtual world, and get your leadership presence seen by other people.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a couple of, so you mentioned the word authentic, and we always want to be as authentic as possible, because I think people can sniff that out. People aren't stupid. I can tell when I'm in the presence of somebody who's just kind of putting it on, and they seem like they're trying too hard, that's not required. Being other than who you are is not required. So what is required? Because it's okay to be introverted. And I love that message in your book. It is okay to be you. It is okay to be introverted. But how can people, women in particular, be successful and be introverted at the same time and get ahead?
Yeah. So one is accepting that is how you are, and accepting yourself as you are, and recognizing, well, that is perfectly okay to be introverted. And then thinking about what it is that they want to achieve. So if it is the case that they want to, get promoted, get to the boardroom, get into a more senior position, and then looking at, well, what do I need to do in order to get there? Thinking about their networks, how they can utilize their network, and having a strategy that will help to position them for that. And so things around, I'll give you an example. A client of mine utilizing LinkedIn and getting in contact with individuals who she's met previously on LinkedIn, looking at organizations who she'd like to work for, looking on their LinkedIn pages at who works at those organizations, and connecting with people who work at those organizations, so that she can develop her network and have one-to-one conversations, because many introverts prefer to have one-to-one conversations than speaking en masse to people.
Yeah, right. And I think throughout your book, you talk about how it is really okay. All of this is okay. Don't think you have to be than who you are, and use your network in the way that works for you. You don't have to go and give talks to 100 people. If one-on-one works for you, that can be very impactful too, because you're going to show up then as your best self. So Carol, So you do a confidence, influence, and impact assessment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I've developed a model, a framework in which I work with my clients with. And this assessment is just getting them to do some self-reflection on where they're at in terms of their intention, in terms of what it is that they want to achieve, their mindset, looking at their any self-limiting beliefs, looking at their self-awareness, looking at how emotionally intelligent they are. P is for presence, and that's how they come across as leaders. Are they visible? Are they promoting themselves? A is alignment, and aligning themselves in terms of positioning themselves for what it is they want, and looking at having a strategy that will help them to get there. C is for courage and how courageous they are. And T is about trust and being authentic and having integrity. And so it's like a self-reflection. So they have a series of questions which they will answer, and then at the end they get a report which will give them some guidance on areas that they may want to look at.
And so what kind of guidance might they receive, just as an example?
So if they scored low on say their mindset, where they maybe have self-limiting beliefs, they experience imposter syndrome, but having a look at how they can challenge their beliefs and how they view themselves, looking at past successes that they've had, and doing the work that they need to do in order to manage that.
Okay, wonderful. So, you know, my brother, I would consider to be more of an extrovert than I am. And, you know, we're talking about somebody of a different gender, but he worked his whole career. He recently retired. He worked his whole career in corporate America. He was VP of an international corporation. And oh my gosh, the level that he had to show up, the energy that took was so huge. And he described, I mean, he and I have had this conversation several times about how it is an extrovert's world in corporate America. It just is. Yeah. Those are the people who get noticed. So it's not that people and women can't have a really meaningful career and can't rise to leadership positions. But what are three things that you would suggest that women do in an extroverted world? So there's certainly connect with your networks, but it is corporate America tends to favor extroverts. What are some other things, just three things that they can keep really top of mind that they can do to help themselves be noticed, right? I think about, have you ever heard of Horton Hears a Who? I don't know if you read much, there was much Dr. Seuss there in the UK, but are you familiar with Horton Hears a Who?
No, I'm not, no.
It might be a regional, I don't know. But it's a book about essentially being heard. And there's this elephant that's holding on to a flower, and on that flower is a dust speck, and on that dust speck is Whoville. And the Whos are trying to not get boiled in oil, essentially. It's kind of a grim, potential outcome. Long story short, the town is running around, of Whoville is running around, and everybody's yelling, we're here. And finally they get the smallest child and take him up to the microphone, and he just yells yop. And so his yop finally rises to the top. And I think of that for a lot of us, we're trying to get our yop to the top, right? We're trying to get heard. And so it's certainly about networking and about how do you connect with people who can help you along the way and have good relationships. How do women who are introverted get their yop to the top?
Yeah. So self-promotion is something that many women, both introverted and extroverted, don't necessarily like.
Yeah.
But when it comes to introverted women, introverts typically don't like to be in the spotlight, and self-promotion it can feel like you're putting yourself in the spotlight, and it can feel like you're bragging and boasting. That some people may see it as bragging or boasting, but there's the ways in which you can promote yourself that feel authentic. So it's thinking about who needs to know about your achievements, who needs to know about your successes and achievements, because oftentimes introverts don't get the opportunities because they don't talk about what they've achieved or what they were capable of. And that's oftentimes what happens. So it's about thinking about, well, who needs to know? And when you're self-promoting, when you're promoting yourself, rather than just talking about, oh, I've done this and I've done that and I'm so fabulous, because that does feel inauthentic and it feels like bragging and boasting, but maybe frame it in a story, in a story, and talk about the difference that you've made, the achievements and what the result was and the difference that you've made, but linking it back to the part that you played in it. Because oftentimes women will play down the part that they played, and they will oftentimes talk about the we, as in, oh, we did this and we did that, rather than I did this. And I've had many clients for whom not promoting themselves, the interview, when they've been in an interview, the interviewers have interpreted that they're not capable of performing at that next level because they haven't demonstrated it. They talked a lot about the we too much, as opposed to the, oh, I achieved this, or this is what I did as a result, this is what happened.
Oh my gosh, I'm so guilty of doing that. I don't know if you are, but I'm so guilty of doing that. It's like, thank you to my whole team. And I am grateful to my team. And I really believe that that's true. And it is hard for me. Is this hard for you too? It can be really hard for me to say, well, I blah, 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 blah. It feels like boasting. So how do you even get around that?
Yeah. So it's still acknowledging the efforts of the team, but recognizing that if you want to demonstrate that you are capable, that you have the ability, then you have to let people know, because oftentimes people think, well, their work and their efforts will show for themselves. But unfortunately, we're in a very noisy world, and that's not always the case. Right. So sometimes you do have to let people know about your successes and your achievements. But as I said, frame it in a story so that it doesn't feel like me. And this was the result. This was the difference that it made. And this is the part that I played in making it happen.
So if I were to do that, excuse me, if I were to try to frame some achievement in a story, or if you've won some awards, Carol, you're an impressive person. So I don't have, I have a pretty good sized team that I work with. I don't know how big your organization is. How would you frame your story so that you can tell people about the great things that you've accomplished, the awards that you've won, in a way that doesn't feel boasting to you? Other people are impressed, but to you it might feel like boasting. So how do you frame that for yourself?
So I might talk about results that I've helped a client to achieve. So I might say, well, a particular client came to me for coaching, and by working with me for coaching, we worked on these particular challenges, and as a result, for example, she achieved a chief operating officer role.
Got it. Okay. So I have to say, you were named one of Britain's top 50 business advisors. Not bad, in 2015 by Enterprise Nation. You've been recognized in LinkedIn, which, talk about a noisy space, as a top voice in the UK every year since 2017. That's a big deal. You were a Rising City Stars champion in 2018, right, in helping women develop as leaders. So this really is your area of expertise, which is why I wanted to talk. I mean, of course, I know lots of introverted men too, but I wanted to talk about women specifically because I think that's part of the folks that you've really worked extensively with. And you've also been one of Britain's inspirational Christian women, making an impact by Keep the Faith magazine in 2019. So you've got lots of accomplishments, and so you can tell stories through results. So you might, instead of saying, well, I was one of Britain's top 50, blah, 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 you might mention that, but how would you fold in, well, yeah, I won these awards with,
Yeah.
right, your story about helping clients? Because that's impressive too. That gives you a bit of credibility too.
Yes, and that gives me the credibility and the recognition. So it's not often that I will actually talk about those. So if I might in writing, if I'm being introduced by somebody for a talk that I'm given, I will mention it, but I don't make it at the focus. I make the focus about the difference that I'm making through my work, and as a result of making this difference, I have received recognition for it.
Right. Okay. Right. So you tell the story of, this is what I have done. This is what I do. This is what I have done. This is how I have been helpful. These are the results. And what do you know, as an outcome of those results, I have been fortunate enough to win these awards.
Yeah.
So you still can take some credit for that, but it's woven into the story.
That's right. Yeah.
Excuse me. I love
and those awards have come about because of, so with regards to the LinkedIn recognition, showing up on LinkedIn consistently. I write articles on a consistent basis on LinkedIn, and that is another way of how women can promote themselves, is through writing articles, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's the company intranet, whether it's the company newsletter, whether it's an industry specific publication. That's another way how they can raise their visibility and raise their profile, is through writing as well. Absolutely.
Right. So making your voice heard on a regular basis. That's part of your, pardon the regional phrase, but yop to the top, getting your voice heard. So you write and you use the word regularly for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's one way for an introverted woman to or an introverted person to be able to get their word out there, is
that's right.
And share other people's work. Put your own thoughts out there.
That's right. Put your own thoughts. Or if you are sharing someone else's article or blog, then just add your own thoughts to it as well when you share it.
Yeah.
And do it consistently. So, don't post something today and then you don't post anything else for another 6 months. Do it on a consistent basis. It doesn't have to be every day, but find a frequency that works right for you.
Yeah, right. One that works for you. I mean, back to being authentic. Don't shove it out there just to get content out, but excuse me, also don't be afraid to have something to say.
That's right. And that's it. And then also, when it comes to promoting yourself, talk about the things that you're passionate about. Because when you're passionate about something, it's much more easier to talk about it and tell people about it.
So what is your favorite thing to talk about and write about?
So I love to, I'm passionate about women just being their best selves. And oftentimes, I think there's too many women who are not achieving their full potential because their self-limiting beliefs get in the way, things that have happened sort of historically from childhood where they've maybe been made to feel that they're not good enough, they get in the way. And once we peel back those layers and they see themselves how they really are, and seeing that transformation, that is what gives me great satisfaction.
Yes, right. And I can see the smile on your face that this really is something you're passionate. That's how we're passionate about it. It's not just, I think this would be a good hot topic. You smile when you talk about it. Excuse me. So, right. So this is really something that's very useful. So we have a question here. It's, what happens in your Facebook group? That's a good question.
So what happens in my Facebook group? It's a group of women from all over the globe. We've got women from all over the globe in the group, and I will share tips, advice, articles about how introverted women can progress.
That's wonderful. So people can join your Facebook group by just hopping on Facebook and typing in.
Right, asking, requesting to join.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So you mentioned a moment ago, Carol, about historical events that happen to women that might cause them to feel less confident. And so there's introversion, and then there's also a lack of confidence. So if we think about, who can have impact on this, let's assume we have parents who are good parents who want to help their more introverted child. They don't want to do things that are going to be hurtful, that will cause the child to feel more insecure. Like, you don't shove a kid who's introverted out onto the stage and demand that they, do something public so that they get over it. How can parents help children? How can parents help little girls become women who are perhaps introverted, but aren't also struggling with confidence? I mean, the world does that to us enough, but is there anything you can recommend for parents?
Yeah, it's allowing them to be themselves. And a lot of the women that I work with who are introverted and experience self-doubt, it's arisen because as a child, they were made to feel that they were not good enough because they were quiet. And I do see this still happening today. There are children who are quieter. So a woman told me how her daughter came home from school upset one day because she'd been marked down a grade. And this girl is bright, she knew her stuff, but the reason why she was marked down was because she didn't put her hand up enough in class. Now, imagine what impact that will have on that girl if she continually gets those messages as she grows, and how that will affect herself, how that will affect her self-belief. She'll be thinking that she's not good enough. I've had clients who as children, because they were introverted and they've got extroverted siblings, they've been made to think that they need to be like their brother or sister. And again, when you're being compared to another child and constantly told, oh, you need to be more like that, you need to be more like that, and not being allowed to do the things that bring you joy. So you're quite happy to be creative or to play by yourself, but still playing with other children. But if you're constantly made to feel that, oh, you're not good enough, then that is going to affect you as you grow.
Absolutely. Right. And I'll tell you, I end up spending a fair amount of my time undoing some of that with people, right, in therapy, because there's all those messages, and I can tell them all day long what they heard about themselves isn't accurate, but it's so embedded, it's unconscious. So I would imagine you're experiencing that in your coaching as well. So we have good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, Hannah. We have a thought from Hannah. It looks like being a leader requires that one constantly communicates with the people that they lead. How would an introverted leader keep conversation open in these COVID times with limited physical interaction? Love that. That's a great question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Hannah. Yes, that is a great question. Make most of technology. So have whether it's Zoom or whatever platform, whether it's Zoom, Teams, or whatever platform you use, have virtual meetings. Maybe set up a WhatsApp group with your team so that you can keep in contact with them. That do keep that. And I think it's now more than ever, it's important that leaders do keep in contact with their team, because working in isolation, people can get very isolated. So just having that contact with people, but at the same time, not overdoing it, because some people may not want that, but making use of the technology to stay in touch with people.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Thank you, Hannah. So we just have a couple of minutes left. These half hours always come by so quickly. It feels like
very quick.
So, Carol, tell us a little bit about your book. Oop, I'm going on. Please tell us a little bit about our book. And if somebody wants to work with you, you can work with them even across the pond.
That's right.
So how can people work with you in the UK? How do they work with you here? And tell us about your book.
Okay, so my book, it came about because it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago when I started to really specialize in introversion. And the reason why that came about was because being introverted myself, and I started writing articles about the challenges that introverted women face as leaders, and I got inundated with comments and messages, people from all over the world sharing their stories, some of them which were quite horrific. And so I decided that, that was going to become my niche, and it resulted in me writing the book, Quietly Visible. And I want the book to impact women in that, then for them to understand themselves and understand that it's okay to be introverted, but you can still be an introvert and still be a great leader.
Absolutely. And that's really what drew me to your book, is that message. Whatever form of leadership, it might be community leadership, it might be doing social justice work, it might be in corporate America, it might be leading a therapy practice, it might be as a coach, and so I think there's lots of ways that this might show up for women. So I'm so glad you wrote it, and that's how I found you. So tell us a little bit about, if somebody wants to work with you, what do they do?
So if somebody wants to work with me, you can either email carol@aboundingsolutions.com, or you can contact me through my website. We'll set up a call via Zoom so that I can find out more about your situation, and you can get to know me better, find out whether you feel that there's a rapport between us, because it's important that there is a rapport between the coach and the client. So, and then we can take it from there.
I love it. Well, Carol, thank you so much for joining us. You're our first international guest, which is really fun. I love it. So Carol from Abounding Solutions in the UK, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, those of us who are watching us today, those of you who are watching us today, please feel free to contact Carol. You can also contact us at thejunipercenter.com. We are a psychotherapy practice. We help people live their best lives, as do you. So we very much have that in common. Thank you so much. Be well, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Carol, thanks again.
Thank you, Margo. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Bye. And bye, everybody, and thank you for watching.